All right, it's top of the hour, so I guess we can get started. Can everyone hear me?
Hear you fine.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to the first group conversation from the Community Relations Group. I'm David Planella, I'm Director of Community Relations, and I've got the pleasure and privilege of working with a set of awesome individuals. What I'll do today, rather than go straight into questions, indeed the first one, I'll just go quickly through the slides. I won't go through through all of them, since quite a lot of content, with just some highlights on and explaining a bit how our group works. I'm just going to share quickly my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. All right. So essentially, what we do at Community Relations, community is about people, essentially, and what we're trying to do is to implement, what we're doing is to implement our vision that everyone should contribute. As such, we act as facilitators of new contributors to actually submit code to us, or to help people submit content, organize meetups, and essentially do evangelism around GitLab. The way our group is organized, you can see it from the first slide, as in who we are. Essentially, we have a program manager for each one of the programs that we're working on. I'm just going to start from the left. Ray Peck is the program manager for the Code Contributor program, where we essentially make it easy for everyone to submit a merge request to GitLab. As you see through the slides, they are actually organized through the programs. So you see you'll find the content in there. Emily is leading the advocates team, and the mission of the advocates team is essentially to answer every question not every question, but every mention of GitLab on the internet. Then we have John Coughlin as the evangelist program manager. And John's mission is essentially to grow our network of contributors that submit content in general, submit or create content in general about GitLab. Some of the things that John has been focusing on these first months have been jumpstarting our meetup story and making sure that we have all of the resources to enable people to create meetups. You'll see the plans later on in the slide. We're thinking of something that's going to be more overarching, as in creating a GitLab Champions program. Then myself, essentially not much to say other than what I've just said. Then we've got Georgie and Bora, who are the other members of the advocates team. And as you see, we're mostly Europe and EU based. Couple of highlights on contributors. Ray has been working essentially on streamlining the code contributor journey, and as such, he's been working on a series of initiatives, such as the hackathon, to essentially encourage people to contribute and to facilitate those contributions. He generally works with the product team, with product managers, with merge request coaches, and reviewers as well. We have quite a bit of metrics in there. The key one that we're using is essentially the number of contributions per release, and that's essentially number of merge requests per release from the wider community. I'll just jump straight into evangelists. As I said, John has been kickstarting the GitLab GitLab's meetups strategy this quarter. In addition to that, also as part of meetups, he's working with speakers and starting to engage with them to on the next quarter to focus more on having more community-led meetups for GitLab, or doing presentations at an event representing GitLab. One thing that I should mention in here as well is that one of the things that we're going to be working next cycle is that GitLab Champions program. If you look at the slides, you'll see the issue, and the idea is to build upon this network and create something bigger. Champions program, you might have heard about Docker captains or Mozilla reps or MongoDB MGUs. There are many different ones, but what we're trying to do is essentially create some branding around GitLab, and then also support and highlight our advocates in the wider community. You'll also be working with tech evangelism, now part of corporate marketing. And the initial thoughts, and this is just work in progress right now, is that we'll be working in the way that June has put it as an analogy. The evangelist program will be as the XDR for elevating our best advocates, or our most advocates with more potentials, leaders in our community, to tech evangelism. Jumping through advocates, one of the highlights this quarter was essentially to add two new channels. We've got a set of social channels that we keep track on, and when I say keep track, this means responding to mentions and involving experts. Essentially, we do not answer all of the questions ourselves. You can see again that link on the slide with the involving experts workflow. And what we do is to try to provide the best answer possible. And as such, we engage with the experts in the team. So you'll see often advocates pinging you in the channels, asking you to answer some questions on those social channels. So that's essentially what we do to support our community. We added a couple of channels this quarter. There's a mention of Reddit here. We had already done this previous quarter, but it's mostly Stack Overflow and the GitLab forum. We wanted to get some more visibility on what's happening outside of our own channels, and that's why we chose Stack Overflow as well, because it's essentially a place where developers go to ask their questions. Jumping to open source, we've been working with a few large open source projects. The most recent ones have been KV and Haskell to migrate to GitLab. But we're starting to work on a partnership with the CNCF as well. And then finally, as we're running out of time, I'll just mention a couple of other programs we're working on, which are free programs to gain visibility of GitLab in the open source world and in education as well. We offer free licenses for GitLab, GitLab free licenses for educational institutions, and also for open source projects. You can see the numbers in there. And then finally, you can also see our OKRs. Yeah, I think with this, we can just go straight into questions.
I'll verbalize it. My first question: what's the content of the meetups? Who's showing up? How we're measuring success? Is it just people showing up, or do they get to rate it?
I can answer that one. So the content for the meetups has varied quite a bit because we've been partnering with many different types of groups. So we've had folks doing talks about dynamic application security testing, DevOps related talks, basic introductions to Git and GitLab. And so it's really driven primarily by the group and, kind of what their community, what stage their community is at. It's a mix of, GitLab branded meetups and us giving talks at someone else's meetups. And so that's why the content has varied quite a bit. As far as who's showing up, I think, the meetup community in general tends to be very developer focused. And so the folks that we kind of hear are, the users of GitLab, like the end users, not necessarily the buyer personas that you would see at some of the field marketing events or corporate marketing events. And the way that we measure success right now is just in the number of people showing up, but We do have a feedback form. We haven't been using it extensively, but I think there is an opportunity for us to do some kind of quarterly survey of members of the meetup groups that are associated with our Meetup Pro account to get better feedback on not just, the folks showing up, but also what their experience has been and identify areas where we can improve the content or the events. So that's a good call out.
And how many people did show up?
I think we average, like somewhere in the 40 to 50 range for events. And so, there's been, about 10 events so far this quarter with more to come. So we'll have a kind of a better number at the end of the quarter, but I think right now we're probably somewhere in like the 300 to 400 range.
And do you think it's useful to count a meetup where we maybe sponsor and do swag, but we don't have a speaker?
I think it can be useful. But we haven't been counting those meetups so far.
I think that's to keep that number comprehensive. I think that's smart because you can send stickers to 1,000 meetups, but if you don't get in front of people, I think the impact is way less.
Yeah, so we track those events that are happening where there's GitLab content, but we haven't been involved in the creation of the event or the delivery of the content. And in some cases, we do send them swag and things, but the events that we're tracking are really events that are either a GitLab branded meetup or GitLab focused content at a GitLab kind of related topic. So if it's a Kubernetes or a DevOps event with a talk about GitLab, we'll track those as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't have to necessarily be someone from our team, but at least the talk has to be about GitLab. Just our logo on a sponsor slide is, I think it's additional if we already have speakers there. Cool. Thanks. I got the second question too. It's being handled in the chat, but I want us to have a look at what, for example, Mattermost is doing with branded swag. If you send a contribution, if you want to thank people, it's nice to name them. And that goes for the swag as well. So I really hope we can make that happen.
Yeah, I agree. We're in the process of changing our merchandise, so we can definitely ask that question. The interesting thing is, some of the contributors, I get pinged as soon as their MRs get merged. They want their mugs like right now, but we'll see what kind of impact it has, not just in terms of cost, but how much lead time that would require for individualizing merchandise.
Cool. And the university's question got answered in the doc. So Clement, you're next.
Most of my questions were answered in the doc as well, but the main question I want to ask is kind of about the core team. Seems very male dominant, so I just wanted to see if there's any thoughts or discussions about how to bring more diversity to that team.
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is something I've been thinking about. I'll add this to the doc as well. I just launched a website this week to recognize top contributors from last year. I'm having a hard time pacing this. I think there are about 35 people that I listed as like a top contributors, and it broke my heart. Like none of them are female. So we don't necessarily have a deep bench in terms of elevating somebody to the core team, but that's something that I'm starting to work on, getting feedback on like our onboarding materials, for example, so it's something definitely to keep an eye on, but it's a good observation.
I think it might be a good idea to bring it up on the next core team.
Yep, agreed.
Cool. And then I'll just kind of ask, we've been partnering with a project that's going through Apache incubation for the front end. And so I was just trying to see if there's any thoughts about partnering with Apache since we're doing all these partnerships with these open source projects.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. If you've got let's get in touch to see what you've been doing with that project and see if we can replicate that with other ones.
I want to quickly say that thank you for the slides. This slide deck is comprehensive, but it also looks beautiful, and it has a lot more data than before. So really great work.
Oh, awesome. Great work, team. I just want to add a note on the university's question. I mean, Bora has been working on this with university, and it's been a bit of a challenge to add the logos themselves. But we are working with them. So essentially, what we did was to get in touch with this top 100 universities. And we asked them to permission to add their logo, and we asked them for permission to, or not permission, but we asked them to work on a case study. I think we've got about 7, 10, Bora, you will correct me, that agreed to participate on a case study, and we're trying to work with them right now. The logo part was a bit trickier, and it had to do also with the legal document that we have for them to sign. Some were concerned about how verbose the contract was, and we're working with legal to see if there's anything that we can do to simplify this and be able to add their logos.
That's interesting, because I think it's good that we ask them whether we can use it, but I don't think we have to have them sign something. So let's maybe discuss that at some point, but maybe not interesting for the rest of the company.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, the way we did it was in the same way that we do it with customers, essentially. But yeah, let's discuss this offline then.
What are the goals? Where are we? Where are we going? Or maybe a much more interesting one, because the goals is a bit of a vague question. Can you talk a bit about the Stack Overflow questions? I think that's a very interesting graph. I wouldn't have expected Jenkins and Azure DevOps to see such explosive growth. On the other hand, it's interesting to see that GitHub is trending down.
Yeah.
Travis CI is trending down. Bitbucket is kind of staying the same. Maybe we can talk through that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, just some context. I added this graph essentially to have some extra data. This is not something that we're tracking right now. I'd like to have a better overview of how we work with both Stack Overflow and both Stack Overflow and Hacker News. Yeah, I found this on the Stack Overflow side. You can have some tags which are populated with some of our competitors. Not all of them are in there. And then yeah, I mean, it seems that GitLab is trending up. Azure is going up has got a big increase in the number of questions. And then I was also surprised about Jenkins as well. I don't really know how to interpret that one on Jenkins. I mean, it might well be that it's difficult to use Jenkins, to be honest, and people have got lots of questions. So, yeah.
I don't think that makes sense, although we should make it as easy to use as possible. I think that it's showing that Jenkins is still the prevalent solution in the enterprise, and we have a very long way to go. We're already the better solution, but we still have a lot of replacement to do. So maybe have more content focused around how to migrate from Jenkins to GitLab, and maybe look at automation that's a bit maybe beyond the scope of community relations. But I think everything we can put out as content and case studies of people migrating, I think that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, in any case, this last quarter we've been actually starting to implement tracking and processing these channels. I mean, I personally would like to look at some more metrics for Stack Overflow and Hacker News on the next quarter. But yeah, this is something that I want to discuss with the team.
And I'd be happy to do an interview for a blog post in addition to our direction page about why we don't use plugins, but add the functionality to GitLab itself so that we can maintain it. I think that's an interesting contrast.
Okay. Jason, I think you're next. Do you want to verbalize your question? I'll just go ahead and read it then. Is there any resistance to presences at non-developer focused but highly open source friendly conferences such as Linux Fest or BSD conventions? I'm not sure I understand the part of the resistance. Is it us being reluctant to go to these events or to sponsor them? I mean, I think in any case, this is something that we can look at, and I think it's mostly about defining the goal of the participation and what we can get out of those. So if there's a place where we can run a workshop, for instance, or whether we can have a co-located event on those conferences, I think this would be something useful. One of the things that we've been looking at with both in terms of both the Evangelist program and the Code Contributor program is to, as I have these co-located events with conferences such as Scale, which are community-oriented, community-organized, but also there's quite a lot of overlap with things like DevOps LA. So having a room at Scale might be something that we might want to do for the next edition.
So can you elaborate a bit on the GitLab Champions program? Is it a champions? Do we call them GitLab Champions or heroes?
I'll let John elaborate on this as he's been defining the code. I'll just answer the question on champions. Champions is just a generic name that some DevRel communities use. It's just a code name for now. But yeah, John, I'll let you talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to say. The Champions program name right now is a placeholder. Would love input from anyone who has great ideas on, how we could brand that program. The idea for the Champions program is really to kind of mirror some of the programs that exist in the community where, companies kind of anoint folks, that are leaders in the community or giving lots of talks about their product at events or contributing technical content, to the blog or videos. And so we want to create a program that kind of acknowledges and supports those folks and thanks them for their support of GitLab. And so Champions right now is a placeholder, but if folks have ideas for, great names, we're looking for a good one. So let me know.
Yeah, John, I see that I didn't link any example, but I see multiple other companies calling it heroes. So, although the most famous one is the Docker Captains program, and Microsoft have a most valuable person or something like that, MVP. Yeah. I do see other companies calling heroes, and I like the term. It's not. It's the best term I've seen so far. So, one vote for that one.
Cool.
Thanks, Sid.
Yeah. Kyle is also suggesting scientist as another one. But yeah, do feel free to. There's a link on the to the issue to the epic actually on the slides. Feel free to contribute with your input. I mean, not just on the name. Okay, and then if there isn't anything else, I think we can wrap it up and leave 5 minutes for preparation for the next call. I mean, just a quick shout out on the last two slides. We've got a lot of people to thank for. They've been working with us, and yeah, without them, it would have been possible to achieve what we've done so far. But we'll continue working with everyone in GitLab. So thanks everyone. And with this, I think we can wrap it up for today.